thanks to you and the Taiwan Institute for Economic Research for being such wonderful hosts and for bringing us to Taiwan. I think you're doing some really interesting things, and I applaud the whole meeting that you're having. I was asked to speak about what's happening in the U.S. in angel investing, and I will do my best to give you that information, and I really look forward to the question and answer period. A little background about me: I am an angel investor. I've invested in about 10 companies in the U.S., mostly close to my home in Kansas City, Missouri, but I've also invested in companies in Silicon Valley and Seattle, so I have a chance to see what's going on across the U.S. And what I do is I run a trade association of 13,000 angel investors across the U.S. and actually Canada. And I've been studying angel investing for about 12 years, probably not as long as Jenny Tooth, but a real chance to see what's happening in our industry. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the American angel community and just kind of give you a sense of some of the things we've learned. These are the things I'm planning to talk about this evening. So first is just the startup scene, because the angel investing scene starts with entrepreneurs. In fact, if I could understand who's in the room, I'd really like to know that. How many in the room are entrepreneurs? Okay. How many are investors? And how many are what I'll call the startup support community? So you work with startups and help them, be they through incubators or law or government. Okay, so we've got a nice mix in the room. That's really great. So I'll be talking about kind of that community. The impact that startups have on the economy, which is really important to the U.S. and would be here in Taiwan. Some stats and trends about American angel investing, and who angels really are, and what do we do? Because you might be surprised, it's more than just writing checks. And then I'll be talking a little bit about the kinds of companies that we fund. And then I was also asked to talk a little bit about policy, as you mentioned, so building a strong ecosystem and maybe a couple of the policies that work well in the U.S. And finally, we do have some resources that are available to entrepreneurs and investors on our website. I'll be telling you a little bit about that, because you're welcome to use that information as well. So just to get started, this is a little background on the Angel Capital Association. So we are the professional association of angel investors across the U.S. and Canada, so North America. We work with about 13,000 angels who join us through a lot of different ways. A lot of them invest just kind of on their own. Others belong to angel groups, which we'll be talking about a little bit. And more angels are investing online through some friends that have gotten started in the U.S. and elsewhere. And we also work with family offices, so people who are so wealthy they have to have professional people manage their money. I don't do any of that kind of thing. And our mission is to help angel investors become better investors. So we focus on education and training for angel investors so that they can learn about how to select the right kinds of companies, how to support them after they invest, and how to help them be successful and get to some kind of an exit and a good return for both the entrepreneurs and the angels. So we do a lot of education. I spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. looking at public policies that are supportive of angel investors and startups or stop bad things from happening. And what we really do is connect our angel investors to build trust and common processes so that they can invest together. And I'm really proud of how much syndication has come out of that effort. So that's a little bit about us. These are some of our members. You'll be hearing from at least one of them later today. They belong to some of the most famous angel groups across the country, as well as some of the biggest platforms online investing, such as AngelList, are our members. And I'm very pleased that, again, a lot of them work very well together. I think we have 13,000 angels, and they belong to about 250 organizations. Our members have also been lucky to invest in some really great startups. So these are a few that you might have heard of. So for instance, our members have invested, we have the original investor in Pinterest, a lot of investors in Facebook and Hootsuite in Canada. One of my favorite stories is actually the Green Dot, which is a company in Southern California. They make debit cards that people can use. And they're now fairly well known on the west coast of the U.S. But for the angel investors, the story is wonderful because the original investors made 200 times their money when they invested in this company, because it went public. And what's really, really neat about it is the entrepreneur who founded the company is still the CEO of the company. So he's done everything from starting a company to growing it to now being the CEO of a public company. It's a really interesting story, I think. So if we really start thinking about the overall investing scene in the U.S., I think it's important to think about the different pieces of the funding structure for at least American companies. So the first one, the First National Bank of view, really means that in the U.S., funding starts with the entrepreneur, and their credit cards and maybe the mortgage on their house is really how they start getting funded. And it's a very important piece of the puzzle. And then they might work with their friends and family if they're blessed to have people who can put some investment or some kind of money into them. And I actually believe that is actually the biggest source of capital in the U.S. is friends and family. Something like $60 billion a year comes from, in the U.S. dollars, comes from friends and family. People who really care about that entrepreneur and their founder, and they're willing to put some kind of money and backing into them, whatever happens with them. And then something new in the U.S., and we're actually trailing a lot of the rest of the globe, is equity crowdfunding. So we have the ability for anybody in the U.S. to invest in any company, regardless of their financial status. This has only been going on for us for about 3 months, but it's just getting started. That's going to be probably a way to have friends and family invest in these startups. And then coming into investors. We are, in the U.S., we are described this way. We are high net worth people. We're called accredited investors. We don't take a test or anything. It's just a term that we use in the U.S. But it essentially means that we meet a wealth or income status that the government blesses and feels that we can take the risk to invest in these companies. And then after us comes venture capital and private equity. And then which I really think of as expansion capital. I don't see them supporting a lot of startups where I live, but I do think of them as very important expansion capital. And then finally, going private or public stock offerings, the Wall Street, if you might have heard it. So this is kind of a whole set of equity in the U.S., and they all kind of fit together. It's sort of an ecosystem that goes together. But if you think about it this way, every year in the U.S., about 500,000 companies get started. And maybe 200,000 of them are funded by friends and family some way. Some of it's equity, some of it might be loans, some of it they don't really know, they're just supporting the company. And then maybe something almost like 50,000 of them are funded by angel investors. So maybe 10% of those companies are funded by equity investors. And then you get to venture capital, we're talking about startups here. So the companies that started that year, somewhere between, in fact, 1,500 and 2,500 of those are funded by seed funds and passive venture capital. And what I didn't really talk about here is the other 300,000 companies that are ongoing concerns that are not funded by these kinds of investors. They're bootstrapping. They're putting in their credit cards. Some of them might even be getting loans from banks. So the large majority of the companies are not getting the kind of capital we're talking about. But we're talking about these kinds of companies because in the U.S., they're the kind that are creating a lot of jobs and a lot of innovation. And so they're important to our economy. But I just kind of wanted to set that overall background to think about it. And some of the most amazing companies didn't start with equity capital. Some of the Fortune 500 companies based in the U.S. never got the kind of capital we're talking about today. Or they got it later and they weren't planning on it. But then what we also have is amazing companies that got that kind of capital. So the Googles and whatnot got that kind of capital. So if we think about where jobs come from the United States, this is a very complicated chart. I know it's an eye chart a little bit. But this is from the Marianne Foundation, which is the global authority on entrepreneurship. And they did a study using census data and found that basically all the blue bars up there are jobs that were created by companies that were 5 years or less. And the red bars are what happened to job creation without startups. And you'll notice a lot of them go down below. So it meant we lost a lot of jobs in the US between 1977 and 2005. But the net of this is that we found that basically all of the net new jobs in the United States came from companies that were 5 years or less. And this is important because these are some of the companies that angel investors fund and have actually kept us from being in a really bad kind of depression if we were really going into the really bad red spot there. Or another way to think about it is after those companies then got funded, where the job growth really comes from is after their 5 years and they're a Google or a Pinterest or company like Facebook, and they really grow kind of that blue part in the middle. That's where the big time jobs come from. So you want to seed a lot of small companies and you see those couple of companies that can really grow and create a lot of innovation. And those are the kinds of companies that the American private equity market is looking to support via angel investors, venture capital, and beyond. So we've taken a look at it too from the Angel Capital Association, or ACA. And we did a study last year looking at what happened to companies after our members funded them a year later. And we found that the median number of extra jobs that happened a year later was 17 and a half, which is a pretty significant company in my mind. And we had a couple that really, really did well, so the average was 41.4. But this is, I think, some beginning data to understand the importance of angel investors in the startups that they support. So this chart really kind of gives you the overall stats of what's going on with angel investing. So for 2015, American angel investors invested actually $24.6 billion in nearly 71,000 companies located all over the U.S. And that was done by 300,000 angels. And we also believe, doing some studying, that angel investors are responsible for 90% of the outside equity that startups receive. So after friends and family, it's coming from angel investors. It's not coming from venture capital and the like. That's why I think it's really neat that you guys are focused on this early stage investing. Or if you look at it as an average across the way, and it's from a couple of different data sources, individual angels are writing an average check of $10,000 to $50,000 US. I'm writing smaller checks. I'll say that right up front. But then the company is getting about $345,000 average. So those individuals who are writing $10,000 checks are finding a way to work together to get to $345,000 kind of average throughout the market. If you're part of an angel group, which we'll be talking about a little bit, but formal clubs or networks or funds of angels to invest, the average group size deal last year was $850,000 US. So larger types of investments. And we're investing in market valuation. So what is the value of the company before you make the investment? In 2015, that was about $2.7 million. But for angel groups, it was $3 million and going up. And that's going to be a trend I'm talking about, because I hope that's something that others across the world can learn what not to do, because we had valuations go up too much, and the angels were paying too much money for these things. Learn from our mistakes, please. So just taking a look at understanding angel investing and venture capital, I think it's important because America is very well known for our great venture capitalists. So in most years, they've invested about the same amount of money, but in the last several years, we've seen venture capital really, really increase because of something called unicorns, or companies that can grow to $1 billion in a short period of time. So if you look at the comparison there, you can see that in 2015, yes, venture capitalists did invest a lot more money than angel investors, but think about the number of companies they were actually supporting. So in 2015, angels invested in 71,000 companies, whereas venture capital was not just over 4,000. So very well-selected companies in the venture capital world. But the real story is about the stage of the companies that they're investing in. So angel investors were investing in mostly early stage. So you'll see, I think between the 17,000 and the 32,000, that's nearly 50,000 companies that were early stage, compared to venture capitalists, which were at just under 2,500 companies. So that's important to kind of understand where it's coming from. And this comes from data from both the venture capital and angel communities, but it kind of gives you a sense of what's going on. Or another way to look at it is the size of the investments or the checks that the companies are receiving. So for angel investing, the average size early stage deal was 2.6 million compared to 5.1 million for venture capital. So that's why we really think about it as expansion capital. And the average investment, as we talked about, overall is 347 that we talked about before, compared to venture capital, which is $13.6 million. So these are the kinds of investors who are investing to help those companies grow. They've got real products. They've got business models that can really grow. So one of the things to think about is, and angels might be different people in different countries, but this is a picture from a while ago of who American angel investors are. And they're all very, very different. But what we found is, in this study, that we had a lot of angel investors who have been investing for a long time, nearly a decade, and have made 10 investments and maybe 1 or 2 per year. And most of them have had some kind of a good exit or bad exit in that period of time. But most of them have been entrepreneurs before. So you can see that they've been part of 1 or 2 companies for a long time. But we're also finding that a lot of angels are not former entrepreneurs. And Jenny might be talking about that a little bit too. So we're finding more and more angels who came from some kind of a business background, were community leaders, or maybe even bankers, and were interested in supporting entrepreneurs, and they like kind of the mentoring aspect of working with angels. And I don't think I have this here. What we're also beginning to see in the U.S. is a growth in the diversity of who can be an angel. So you'll see, I'm a woman, and I'm seeing that more and more of angels are becoming women investors, and we're seeing people of different ages coming in. So now when I go to an angel group meeting, when I used to see a lot of kind of men in their 50s and 60s and 70s, I'm seeing a mixture of people from their 20s to their 70s. And I think it's a really exciting thing to see, and helps angels make some better decisions, and it's better support for the startup community too. But I think it is important, if you're thinking about who the angels are, think about their wealth, but also think about their background in business and their education, and what they know in the field, because I'll be talking about this later. When you're an angel investor, you're writing a check, but you're also providing your own expertise and support to the entrepreneur. And so if you have the right kind of technology background, or really know a lot about the sector and can help those companies sell more product or find new customers, that's really important. And that makes for a good angel. You may not know about how to make angel investing. I didn't either, but there's education that you can learn about how to be an angel, and that's something that I talk about. So, at least for American angel investing, if we think about it, why are we investing in angels? It's our money, right? So really, we're looking to make some kind of return in the end, in a risky asset class. But this is a chance, as an angel investor, to really do things that you care about. So this is a chance to help entrepreneurs and see some really interesting companies and ideas. And it's a way to stay engaged and give back. The more angels I talk to, the more I find they're really interested in giving back to their community. They like their university, or they think it's just really neat to create this really interesting company in their own community. It's almost like it's your grandchild, and you help this company, and it's a real thrill, and adds a lot to just basic investments. So I think it's a way to be active. The important thing is, at least in the U.S., how a lot of people have heard what angel investors are is we have a television show called Shark Tank, and I don't know if you have something like that here. But it does help when I go talk to congressmen, and they've actually heard of Shark Tank. But what everyone's have to explain is, angels we're not sharks or dragons. We're people who are really interested in companies. We're going to ask a lot of tough questions. but we're going to take our time to make the right kinds of decisions, and we're going to work together, because that's the only way we can support the entrepreneurs and give them the amount of money that they have. So, I think that's really important. So, and if you think about the kinds of companies that angels in the U.S. are supporting, this is kind of an overall design of what we're looking for. So we're looking for really innovative firms, and I'll give you some stats about what that means from a sector standpoint. But companies that have a way to grow and what we call scale, so that they can go from startup to $5 or $10 million in sales and value in a few years. And it's a company that really wants to exit in a short time. So basically, this is for an entrepreneur who does plan to probably sell their company. In the U.S., our good exits happen because a larger company buys the smaller company. And that's a certain kind of entrepreneur. It's a really personal decision to decide if you want to start this business and then sell it and move on to something. If you want to develop a company and grow it so that other of your family can be involved in it later, that's a different kind of funding, but a really great company too. And it's for entrepreneurs who are okay with other people owning stock in their company and having the chance to mentor them, but be involved in some of the decision making. So it does kind of take away some of the freedom that a CEO might have if he doesn't have equity investors, because a lot of us will then become board members of those companies. And then it's really for companies that have a strong business plan and have really thought through how they're going to sell this idea that they have and turn it into value and money. But if we get at kind of their stage, it'd be companies that at least have a prototype. They may not have revenues yet, but they have customers who are really interested in what they're doing and plan to buy when you have it ready. And then we're also looking for companies that have had some support from friends and family and have exhausted everything they can put in so far. They're committed and passionate to the company. So the point for all of this is that this kind of equity capital is right for a small percentage of companies. So I think in the U.S. anyway, that's less than 10%. And something to think about as you're thinking, whatever chair you're sitting in as an entrepreneur, figuring out if this is right for you. If you're an investor, you know it. And if you're thinking about government policy, kind of put it in that framework. I imagine that's a pretty similar situation for anybody across the world. So now I will get into statistics, and these are some of my charts here. So I'll do my best. Are we sharing the slides PDF with everybody? Okay, and I think it translated for them as well. Okay, so this is something called the Halo Report that shows American investing by angel groups. It's only related to angel groups, which is a small piece of angel investing across the U.S. But what it really shows is by sector the number of, I think it's the number of deals. Okay. So really what we're seeing for 4 years in a row is that software is basically the largest that we have, 1/3 of the deals that we've done. And then if we look at healthcare, which is sort of the kind of the third one down, 14.1% combined with pharma and biotech. So if you really get to it, in the U.S., what we're seeing year after year after year is a focus on technology companies and life sciences, but mixed in with other interesting companies like consumer goods, clean tech, and energy, the companies that can grow. There is some investing in manufacturing, but I think that's been less for us. But we do see it kind of in the middle of the U.S. But those are the kinds of companies that can scale. And then this takes a look at the size of investments of angel groups, and showing the median round size. And so what you're seeing is in deals where only angels were involved, which is the purple part, you're seeing quite a growth in 2015 in the size of deal that happened in the U.S. We think that we have been through a bubble. We may still be in it a little bit. So you can see quite a large increase from $500,000 to $850,000. The green dots that are up there are what happens when angels also co-invest with other kinds of investors like venture capitalists. And those deals become a little bit larger. But we're hoping that this 800, I don't see this 850 as good news at all. I'm thinking that we irrationally invested in too much in companies than they should have. And so hopefully when I do a show like this next year, we'll be back closer down to the $500,000. And this chart here shows that a lot of cooperation and syndication has to happen in the U.S. to make entrepreneurs get the amount of money that they need. So, if an entrepreneur needs, let's say $850,000, angel groups themselves are typically investing somewhere between $150,000 and $500,000. So that's not enough for the entrepreneur. So we focus on making sure that the angel groups get to know each other, to trust each other, to have common processes so that they can come up with enough money for the entrepreneurs to get the capital that they need. And this is at the first round. What we're finding is that angels are starting to invest not just in the first round, but in which we call the seed round or the angel round, but in the A round and the B round, and maybe even later to support companies, particularly if they're located in parts of the U.S. that don't have a lot of venture capital. So important thing to think about. Another important part I want to make is that, I think a lot of people, when they think of the U.S., you think Silicon Valley, right? It's a very important, very successful part of the country. And it is where a lot of our venture capital is there. But what we're seeing in angel investing and in this data set is that angel capital is happening throughout the country. It's fairly well distributed. And that should be really good news for Taiwan, because you're seeing that you can see interesting deals and interesting investors who want to support their communities wherever they are. And in the U.S., that means we're located throughout the country and in every state. So I happen to live in the Great Plains, kind of the orange, the 4.3. I see amazing entrepreneurs all the time. And I think that it's really interesting that we can learn a lot from Silicon Valley or Boston or New York, but it's happening throughout the country, and I'm thinking throughout the world. So this is the sad story of what happened in angel investing and what I warn you and caution you against as you go forward. So this chart shows the median pre-money valuation of companies in 2014 and 2015. And maybe you can take this with me if I can get that out. Okay. So, that was fun. Okay. So what this is really showing is that really for 4 or 5 years, the median pre-money valuation, so what the company was worth before angel investors invested, was about $3 million. And it was steadily that for, I think it was 4 years. And then you also saw, kind of a range of valuations across the country. So in 2014, a quarter of them were between, let's say between 2 million and 300,000. And then, but what really happened, and the biggest deals were 13.5 million. But then look what happens with all of the unicorns in 2015. We increased the median valuation by more than 150%. It went from 3 million to 4.6 million. I thought this was a Silicon Valley thing. It's not. It was across the US. And we also saw a huge range, so that some of the highest valuations that angels were investing in was $23.5 million. I think this was a craze that was fueled by a lot of different things across the US. But what we're now seeing as a trend in the US in venture capital and angel investing is that we pay too much for that, and we were having entrepreneurs who were what we call kind of burning our cash. And so we're seeing a retrenchment of the size of the deals, not the number of companies that we're investing in, but the size of deals that angels and venture capitalists are investing in. So something that I recommend that you don't do going forward. So if I kind of fill out the rest of the American story, so I mentioned there was something like 300,000 angels across the US, and they have a lot of different ways they can invest. The large majority invest informally or as individuals, so the tall bar on your left. But what we're starting to see more and more are people investing online. So we probably have And this is for accredited investors only, so angels. This is not the new kind of crowdfunding. What we're seeing is a proliferation of those kinds of things, using the internet and bringing in really experienced angels or maybe some famous angels that you could follow. The brand names of these are, some of them you might have heard of, AngelList, or Seed Invest, Our Crowd, and many others like that Funders Club, where Americans are really finding good ways to invest in these companies. And I think there are more and more opportunities to use these kinds of online platforms for investors throughout the globe to make these investments. And if the laws work, some of the companies that are on these platforms are also from all over. Then we're also seeing a lot of angels invest through accelerators. I think those are pretty exciting. We're seeing proliferation of those across the country. I think we've got some that we share that are under some of the same brands. And then finally, we have angel groups. And so these are people who join formal clubs. They maybe meet monthly or quarterly. They have a way for entrepreneurs to submit their business plans and for the group to work together to figure out if they're going to be investing in some of them. And you'll be hearing from some American ones about that and also some from here tomorrow, I think. But they have different ways to work with each other and different ways to make investments. I find these fun to work with. I find them a way to learn from others. This is how I learned how to invest, by watching really experienced angels share with me what they think about, the kinds of questions they ask entrepreneurs, and then I joined teams to further evaluate investments to learn from. But in the U.S., even though those are a lot of the stats I just showed you, it's less than 10% of American angels. But I think they're important angels because a lot of them are the hub and spoke of their communities. And they see a lot of the deals, and even if they don't invest, they know other angels in the communities to send those deals to. So I think they work out quite nicely. So I do have a few stats on angel groups with that caveat. So this one is really showing our membership and how many angels belong to those angel groups. So in 2015, the average number of angels in an American angel group was 68, which I believe is actually smaller than what Jenny will show from the UK. But really quite a wide range out there. And I would say the largest 20% of the groups are almost 50% of the angels that are our membership. And it's interesting to note that the size of the group probably does relate to the size of the community, but we're seeing some really large groups in places you've never heard of, like Ohio. So if it makes sense for a community to have a lot more to work together, you can do that. Or you can, what we're also seeing now are more groups that have their one brand, and then they have chapters in different parts of the country. So in the US, we have a group called Next Gen Ventures. And these are angel investors who are 40 years old or less, and really kind of have a different view of how to work with entrepreneurs, really connected to their startup support communities. And so they started in Washington, D.C., and now they have chapters in New York and Austin and 5 other places. And that's kind of the new thing that's happening across the U.S. And this group works pretty well with young entrepreneurs. And what we're also seeing is, you saw the wide range of number of angels in a community, what we're also seeing is quite a range of their actual investment activity. So, we saw in 2015, the average angel group did just over 10 deals, but one group did 61 investments, which is pretty amazing. And I think they were on the West Coast, but I don't think they were in Silicon Valley. So there's really, there's quite a range there. And then finally, we have quite a range in the number of deals, and then you have a range in how much total investment the group made. So this is that stat. So we saw, that the average angel group did about $2.5 million in investment, but again with a range. I belong to 2 angel groups in my town of Kansas City, and one of them did, I think it was $2.7 million in 2015, and the other, which is all women investing in women-led companies, was more like $1 million. But you still feel like you're really contributing to what's happening in the community. But it does show there's really quite a range. There are a lot of different ways to do angel investing. There's not necessarily a right way. There's just kind of learning different options and what works for you. If I look at trends and how deals are being done in the U.S., I would say there's some strong preferences across the country. So most of us like to do what we call priced rounds. That means when we make the investment, we decide what the valuation is up front and how much stock company we owe. But what we're starting to see more and more is convertible debt. And that means when the investors first invest, you agree on how much they're going to invest, but the actual price will happen in the next round of investment. And what is essentially a loan, or there's some other structures in there, will be converted into equity in the next round. And you're counting as an angel that the next round people will price it right. And the thought might be that the company will be more developed and it's easier to make that determination. But we're seeing a growth in that kind of alternative investing in the US. You'll see most looking for sectors and products where the products are developed and they have some kind of traction with their customers, which might mean that angel investors are starting to invest a little bit later and later stage. And what we're also seeing is a lot of differences in valuation. It'll be really, there's differences in different sectors. So the cost for a software product might be quite different for all the pricing that you need to develop some kind of a medical technology. But there's also a real difference between location. If you think about it, I mean, at least in the US, there's a wide, just think about your home value. For us, a home in New York City would cost a lot more to purchase than it would in my town of Kansas City. And it's a little bit that way in business valuation as well. Angels in their deal structures are also looking, especially if they're part of an angel group, for a board seat, if they made, they're kind of a more significant investor. And this may not fit you guys, but we have some new rules in the US where entrepreneurs can actually advertise their investment offerings. Does that work that way here? No? Okay. So I mean, in the US for 70 years, angel investments were all totally private. And then with something called the Jobs Act 3 or 4 years ago, finally entrepreneurs could start advertising their investments, but it came with a whole lot of strings. And so what we're finding is that most angels don't want to invest in those advertised deals because it comes with too many liabilities for what they're doing. And I could spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is kind of looking at what angel investors do, and I think it's really important. So it's a lot more than a check. It's really, a lot of us are investing because we want to support the entrepreneur. So we're trying to use our expertise after we've written the check, or maybe as part of getting to know the company. We're trying to help them find new customers and think through how can they attract the right team to help them build their goals and develop strategies. And some of us even get involved in helping get to the exit and every little detail of that, finding the company that's going to buy them and going through the whole negotiation process. And that really is a strong piece of what we do. We also spend a lot of time really figuring out how we can make investments work and make them not be so risky. I've got a slide to show on that in a minute. So we really spend a lot of time evaluating the deals and taking them through a whole process, from screening a deal to talking with the entrepreneurs to doing a lot of due diligence and getting to terms and a term sheet that works for everybody. But we also like to work hand in hand as part of the ecosystem. So that's really being, working together with universities and economic development people and accelerators and incubators, not only finding where the deals are coming from, but being part of those programs. So being judges in pitching contests and providing mentorship to help those companies where they go. And we know that works. There's a study done by Harvard and MIT that found that angel support when you do those kinds of things, improves the startup success rate, not just in the US, but worldwide. Might be worth something to look at if you're from the policy arena. So I mentioned the riskiness of angel investing. This will be another one where I'm stepping down. This time I will try not to fall. Okay, so this is a study that Jenny might have a UK version of this too. We have the same researcher who did this study. This particular study looked at more than 3,000 exits. And when I say exits, this time I mean either something successful happened or the company went out of business. And what they found kind of from an overall standpoint of all of this is that the angels in this study made 2.6 times the amount they invested in 3.5 years, which works out to an internal rate of return of about 27%, which is not so bad, right? If you're thinking about it compared to other things. But here's the thing. There's a wide distribution in what really happens with these investments. So in this case, 52% of our angel investments lost some or all of their money. In fact, 35% lost all of their money. And then you started seeing a good return. 1x means 1 times your investment. So about a third of them made 1 to 5 times their investment in 3.3 years, going all the way to these people down here made 30 times their money in 6 years. This is where the big returns come from. These are their unicorns. So there's a huge disparity in what the returns can be. And the thing is, it's really hard to tell who's going to be one of those and who's going to be one of these, because there's so many factors that could come into it. So one of the things we really learned from this process is if you're an angel investor, you need to think about making multiple investments. You have to have a portfolio strategy that will give you some risk mitigation and give you the chance to have at least one of these kinds of exits. Now, I'm just having my first kind of exit. I'm super excited about it. It's between 5 and 10. But, we looked at companies that have a chance to get to 10 times their growth to be able to have this return. And this also shows that kind of over time, you spend more time with companies that are going to be successful. So at the top, you'll notice basically the angels lost their money in 3 years compared to this, it was a 6-year or more time period for the more successful companies. So at least you know if your company is not going to be doing well, you might know a little bit sooner and be able to write that money off. It's a very important concept for angel investors to understand and for entrepreneurs to know why angels are looking for so much of a potential return when they're thinking about it, because there's a lot of risk that they take. Let's see, if I look at a couple of trends that are going on, I'll just point out a couple. So I think I've talked about this a few times. We've seen a lot of growth in the valuation of the companies we're investing. We call that unicorn thinking, and we do think that there's going to be some reduction of that in this coming year. And so you're finding smaller valuations and maybe some investors not willing to invest kind of early on, I guess is how I'll put it. We're seeing a lot of use of social networking in the US. LinkedIn is awesome as a way for angels to kind of check into companies. It's certainly a way that we're getting to meet each other. It's also a way where entrepreneurs are contacting us as angel investors. If you're an entrepreneur, please do not ask me to be LinkedIn with you. Because what I want to do as any angel is get to know you first before I do that. I guess I would also say there's a lot of trends up there. We're seeing a little bit more cross-border investments, so between countries, but for us it's a slow process. It's about getting to know each other, maybe having affinity with the country that you're in, but building trust between investors and entrepreneurs. We're also seeing a lot more government interest in job creation, angel investing, and startups. So I'll talk about that just a little bit, and then I'll be done. So if I think about the ecosystem in the US, this is how I would describe it. It starts with the entrepreneur in the middle. It's my friend Laura Long. And we're really trying to put things together that support that entrepreneur. So we're trying to do things like connect and collaborate entrepreneurs with investors, and other supporters that they can have. We're trying to make sure that that the entrepreneurs are working with experienced investors and other entrepreneurs to learn from each other, and I think that's a piece of what you're doing tomorrow. I think that's really cool. And we're trying to make sure that we're supporting startups, not just to start up, but to be able to scale up, and getting the resources to do that, and doing things like demo days and pitching like we're doing here to give visibility, having some rules and regulations that support everybody. There's a little bit about taxes and good tax policy that's there. But it's really about supporting innovation and ways for exit. So if I think about how we get to those from a public policy standpoint, there's 5 things I would talk about in the US. One is we have something called Regulation D, which really makes it easier for investors to make angel investments. It's a complicated kind of thing, but basically it's a good pathway for angels to invest in startups without having to do a lot of government paperwork, bottom line. The next thing is making sure that you've got regulatory communications that support and recognize market innovation. So as we've been using the internet more and more, we're finding that our regulators are figuring that out, or starting to figure it out, and make it easier for everybody. We are also seeing, probably from a taxation standpoint, the biggest difference that in the US is that in like 1986, Congress made capital gains, so when you make money from an investment, have a lower tax rate, and that seems to have grown our investing the most. But I really think that government role is about supporting education and mentoring for the entrepreneurs and angels, and making sure there's a lot of education to learn how to be an angel, how to make the process work, and for entrepreneurs to understand how to grow and scale up their companies and how this whole process works. And then I think it's also supporting research and innovation by startups. So we have a grant program nationally that supports that. I'm running out of time, so I will not do the rest of this, but I just want to get a couple of processes and options available to you. So the Angel Capital Association website is available and free for use. It's angelcapitalassociation.org. We have webinars that are free. We have all kinds of research. Or if you're interested in articles we publish in Forbes and Inc. on either how to be a good angel, or for entrepreneurs how the process works. And you're welcome to look at that anytime. And you can sign up for our newsletter as well. Please feel free to do that. And just to wrap up, as Eric was talking about, I invite anybody who's an investor or is part of the startup support community to join us for our annual conference. It's going to be in San Francisco next April. And it's a chance to really meet 700 of the most interesting and active angel investors across the US and the world. And we really enjoy seeing our colleagues from across the world. And I hope some of you will join us. Thanks again for having me, and I really look forward to the opportunity for Q&A later. Thank you.